from the Presidential Palace, Manila. Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, I am Win Peñano bringing you today's edition of Dateline Malacañang. Here are top Malacañang stories. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has directed the Philippine Navy to further strengthen its capabilities and deepen defense cooperation with allied nations as the country faces evolving security challenges and works to protect its interests in the West Philippine Sea. Speaking during the 128th anniversary celebration of the Philippine Navy, the President emphasized the vital role of maritime defense in safeguarding the country's sovereignty, economic interests, and regional stability. President Marcos said the rapidly changing geopolitical landscape has made the Indo-Pacific region a focal point of global competition, underscoring the need for a strong and credible naval force. The Commander-in-Chief also instructed the armed forces of the Philippines and the Department of National Defense to expand military engagements and strengthen cooperation with allies and partner nations.
Strengthening the Philippine Navy's capabilities remains essential to protecting our interests in the West Philippine Sea in light of the broader realities of our time. Rapid economic and political developments in the 21st century have reshaped global growth and placed the Indo-Pacific region at the geopolitical and economic center of gravity. The seas around us are arenas of competition and of conflict. Global instability, shifting alliances, and emerging threats demand that we maintain a resilient maritime defense posture. In this environment, a credible Philippine Navy is indispensable to regional peace. Thus, I have directed the Philippine Navy to further strengthen its capabilities. The DND-AFP was also tasked to further expand and deepen partnerships, exchanges, and interactions with allies and friendly forces.
The directive comes amid reports of new Chinese construction activities in Scarborough Shoal, also known as Bajo de Masinloc, a disputed area located about 124 nautical miles from Zambales. The President said ongoing modernization efforts will help the Navy better protect Philippine sovereignty, secure maritime resources, and contribute to regional peace and stability. As part of the anniversary celebration, President Marcos led the commissioning of the new offshore patrol vessel BRP Raha Lacandula, describing it as a significant milestone in the Navy's modernization program. The President Marcos also paid tribute to Navy personnel for their service, particularly their rapid response efforts following the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that struck off Sarangani on Monday. He noted that Naval Forces Eastern Mindanao immediately activated disaster response measures and placed rescue units on heightened alert for humanitarian operations.
Truly, this is a pivotal step towards realizing the Navy's vision of a modern and self-reliant force. This vessel enhances our capacity to safeguard our resources and assert our sovereignty. To the crew of the ship, may you sail her with pride and let the world know that the Filipino spirit will never be intimidated. The dedication and service of the men and women of the Philippine Navy mean that our communities can sleep peacefully at night. It means that our fisherfolk can sail further with confidence. It also means that the global community will see that our country is a credible and formidable anchor of peace and of international law.
President Marcos assured Navy personnel that the government remains committed to supporting their welfare and providing the resources needed to carry out their missions effectively.
Be assured that your government remains committed to supporting your welfare and ensuring that you are equipped to carry out your mission.
Dateline Malacañang.
In related news, Philippine Navy or PN Chief Jose Maria Ambrosio Espeleta said the strong support of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has enabled the Navy to acquire modern assets that significantly strengthen the country's maritime defense and security capabilities. Speaking during the Philippine Navy's 128th anniversary celebration in Taguig City, Espeleta highlighted the acquisition of the guided missile frigates BRP Miguel Malvar and BRP Diego Silang, now considered the Navy's most advanced warships. He also cited the commissioning of offshore patrol vessels BRP Lacandula, BRP Raha Sulaiman, along with fast attack interdiction crafts such as BRP Audrey Banyares and its sister ship BRP Albert Magini. Espeleta also announced the delivery of the BrahMos shore-based anti-ship missile system, describing it as a major milestone for both the Navy and the armed forces of the Philippines. He added that the Navy has expanded its unmanned systems program, including locally developed unmanned aerial systems capable of supporting intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions at distances of up to 120 kilometers. According to the Navy chief, these modernization efforts are part of the service's long-term undersea capability development program aimed at transforming the Philippine Navy into a modern and credible maritime force capable of protecting national interests and contributing to regional security. From 2025 through the first quarter of 2026, the Philippine Navy conducted more than 6,620 naval missions, covering over 972,000 nautical miles and logging more than 152,000 hours of operations. Naval aviation units also carried out over 1,500 missions, accumulating more than 4,100 flight hours and covering more than half a million nautical miles in support of maritime domain awareness and national security. The Navy's sea lift assets likewise transported nearly 6,000 military personnel, more than 1,700 civilians, millions of tons of military supplies, and over 200,000 tons of civilian cargo, enabling government services and military operations to reach remote areas across the archipelago. Espeleta said continued joint operations with other AFP units will further expand maritime patrol coverage by at least 120,000 nautical miles, helping safeguard Philippine territorial waters and national interest.
Dateline Malacañang.
In our news, Malacañang has warned that anyone found responsible for alleged efforts to sow disorder or pose security threats within the Senate will face the full force of the law. During a palace briefing on Tuesday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said reports of alleged security threats against the Senate have already been referred for investigation. Castro stressed that authorities will hold accountable anyone whose actions may endanger public order regardless of position or status.
Sa mga nagtatangka, dahil nga may nauulinigan po na ganitong mga security threats, kayo man ay senador o ordinaryong tao na nagsasagawa nito, hindi po kayo makakaligtas sa kamay ng batas.
The reported threats, described as clear, present, and serious, have prompted discussions on possible adjustments to existing security measures. Senate officials are currently coordinating with the National Bureau of Investigation and other intelligence agencies to ensure the safety of senators and approximately 2,000 Senate employees. The development comes amid an ongoing leadership dispute in the Senate involving Senator Alan Peter Cayetano and Senate President Pro Tempore Sherwin Gatchalian. Cayetano, who continues to assert his claim to the Senate presidency, earlier claimed that there are now two Senates, the Senate of the Philippines and what he referred to as the Senate of Malacañang. Asked whether the palace considers Cayetano an obstructionist or a source of misinformation, Castro instead reiterated President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s appeal against the spread of false information.
Ito po ang sabi ng Pangulo. Fake news is flying around. Those into it should cease and desist. Yan po ang malinaw na sinabi ng Pangulo.
Malacañang says it remains focused on maintaining stability and upholding the rule of law as authorities continue to assess the reported security concerns surrounding the Senate.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang is urging senators to resolve the ongoing leadership dispute in the Senate before pursuing any special session, warning that legislative work could remain stalled if divisions persist within the chamber. Speaking at a palace briefing on Tuesday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said discussions regarding a possible special session are still being finalized, but President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. wants senators to settle their internal issues first. Castro said lawmakers should prioritize public service and focus on addressing the needs of the Filipino people rather than personal interests.
Ang gusto po ng Pangulo ay mauna ang Senado na magkasundo dahil kahit sabihin natin na mayroong hiling ang Pangulo para sa isang special session, kung sila mismo po ay hindi magkakasundo, mababaliwala po ang naisin ng Pangulo. Dapat ayusin po nila ang Senado para ito naman ay para sa taong bayan, hindi pang sarili. So unahin muna nilang maayos ang kanilang mga sigalot at ang kanilang mga isyu sa Senado.
The Senate has been grappling with a leadership conflict after Senator Sherwin Gatchalian was elected Senate President pro tempore and acting Senate President following several days of turmoil that resulted in the cancellation of sessions. Former Senate President Alan Peter Cayetano has rejected the leadership change, describing it as an illegal takeover and refusing to recognize the authority of the new majority bloc. Despite the dispute, Malacañang has recognized Gatchalian as the Senate's acting leader, citing existing Senate precedents and legal basis. Asked whether a special session could still proceed despite the impasse, Castro said any such move would be ineffective if lawmakers remain unable to conduct legislative business. Castro reiterated that senators should place the welfare of the public above political ambitions and personal interests.
Kahit humiling ang Pangulo ng special session, kahit sa kanya manggaling ang special session, kung wala pong mangyayari dahil hindi po nagkakasundo ang mga senador sa Senado, mababaliwala po yan. Dapat unahin ng mga senador natin ngayon ang taong bayan, hindi ang sariling interes o ambisyon.
As earlier indicated that President Marcos is open to calling a special session if Senate leaders formally request one and provide sufficient justification. For now, Malacañang says resolving the leadership dispute remains the key step toward restoring normal legislative operations in the Senate.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of the Interior and Local Government or DILG will investigate the dumping of garbage in front of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources Office in Davao City, according to Malacañang. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said Interior Secretary John Vic Rimulya has assured the palace that a thorough investigation will be conducted into the incident. Castro said authorities will first determine whether negligence or violations of environmental laws were committed before any decision on possible sanctions is made. She added that it is still premature to discuss specific penalties while the investigation is ongoing, stressing that any sanctions would depend on the severity of any confirmed violations.
Magkakaroon po ng malalimang pag-iimbestiga rito. Nabanggit po ni Secretary John Vic, maaari pong mapag-usapan at matignan kung may negligence at kung mayroong paglabag sa environmental laws. Pero ayaw natin pangunahan kung ano magiging action po dito ni Secretary John Vic Rimulya, pero sinigurado po niya na magpapaimbestiga po siya.
Castro also reminded local officials that public service must always come first and that accountability will be pursued where necessary.
Sa lahat na po ng mga leader sa LGUs, tandaan po natin, kayo po ay para sa taong bayan, hindi pansarili, hindi po dapat katamaran o pangsarili ang iniisip. Isipin niyo po ang inyong constituents. So sa lahat po na mag-aakto ng binabaliwala ang kanilang constituents o kanilang trabaho, dapat po sila maimbestigahan.
earlier condemned the dumping of garbage outside the DNR regional office in Davao City, calling it a violation of environmental laws and a setback to efforts addressing waste management issues following a recent trash slide at a local sanitary landfill. The Environmental Management Bureau had also raised concerns, saying the dumping violates the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000 and poses health and environmental risks. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources has already ordered the temporary closure of the New Carmen Sanitary Landfill, while assessment and recovery operations continue in the affected area.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. will not take action against Department of Health or DOH officials facing allegations of alleged misuse of public funds unless sufficient evidence is presented. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro made the statement following a complaint filed by a group of health workers seeking an investigation into DOH officials over an alleged upgraded airfare for a trip to Switzerland. The complaint lodged before the Office of the Ombudsman involves Health Secretary Teodoro Herbosa and Undersecretary Albert Francis Domingo over claims of a business class upgrade for an official travel to the World Health Assembly in Geneva. In a palace briefing, Castro said the president sees no basis at this time to issue any reprimand, stressing that due process must be observed.
Sa ngayon po ay hindi po pa maninita ang Pangulo dahil wala naman pong nakikitang anuman pong ebidensya. Siguro ko po kapag po nagkaroon na ng resolution ang Office of the Ombudsman, then that's it. Magsasagawa na po ng action ng Pangulo.
That any administrative or disciplinary action will depend on the outcome of the proper legal process, particularly the findings of the Office of the Ombudsman. She said the concerned officials will be given the opportunity to respond to the allegations and present their evidence.
Kung ito po ay naisampa naman po ang reklamong ito sa Office of the Ombudsman, sila na po ang kailangan magdepensa sa sarili nila. At kung sila naman ay may mga ebidensya na papabor sa kanila, yun ang ipakita nila bilang kanilang depensa.
Alliance of Health Workers earlier filed a complaint before Ombudsman Jesus Crispin Remulla seeking a formal investigation into the alleged travel upgrade. The group claimed the travel arrangement resulted in additional government expenses for a Department of Health official attending the 79th World Health Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland. For now, Malacañang says it will wait for the findings of the proper investigating authorities before taking any further action.
Dateline Malacañang.
President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has ordered government agencies to sustain relief and recovery operations in Mindanao following the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that struck off Sarangani, while prioritizing the safety of patients in damaged hospitals. During a situation briefing in Malacañang on Tuesday, the President directed the Department of Health and the Department of Public Works and Highways to immediately assess affected hospitals and identify safe areas for patient transfer. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the President also instructed the Department of Energy to ensure the restoration and stability of electricity supply in critical facilities, especially hospitals.
Ayon sa Pangulo, higit na nangangailangan ng agarang atensyon ang mga pasyente sa mga lugar na niyanig ng malakas na lindol.
Then Marcos also held a virtual meeting with General Santos City Mayor Lorely Pacquiao, who briefed him on the situation and needs of affected communities. The President assured local officials that the national government will provide full assistance to areas hit by the disaster. Relief operations are ongoing through the Department of Social Welfare and Development with support from the Philippine Air Force and Philippine Coast Guard in reaching isolated communities cut off by landslides and damaged roads. Castro said displaced residents are currently staying in evacuation centers and temporary shelters provided by the government.
So, hindi po ito pababayaan at nag-ulat din po ang DSWD na kahit po yung mga malalayong lugar at yung mga lugar na hindi po naaabot ng mga sasakyan natin sa ngayon dahil nasarahan po at nagkaroon ng landslide, nagawan po nila ng paraan para maabot po ang mga kababayan natin.
The President is also planning to visit quake-affected areas, although the schedule has yet to be finalized. The Department of Health has already deployed medical assistance teams, while the Department of Education is coordinating with local governments to ensure the safety of students. Authorities also reported that communications remain stable in most affected areas, while electricity has been restored in several parts of Mindanao. As of Tuesday morning, the Office of Civil Defense confirmed at least 37 fatalities, with more than 1,000 aftershocks recorded following the powerful earthquake.
Dateline Malacañang.
In related news, the Philippine National Police or PNP has deployed more personnel to evacuation centers across Mindanao following the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that struck Sarangani. More than 2,000 police officers are now assisting in crowd control, relief distribution, and public safety efforts, with over 2,400 displaced individuals currently staying in evacuation centers. PNP Chief General Jose Melencio Nartates Jr. said the increased police visibility aims to support local governments and reassure affected communities as search and rescue operations continue. Authorities also confirmed damage to several police facilities, while additional personnel remain on standby for ongoing response operations.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Bureau of Customs or BOC is preparing to donate confiscated goods to communities affected by Monday's magnitude 7.8 or 7.8 earthquake in Mindanao. Customs Commissioner Ariel Nepomuceno has directed ports nationwide to identify forfeited items that can be immediately used for relief efforts, including clothing, footwear, school supplies, tents, and mobile power units. Meanwhile, Public Works Secretary Vince Dizon inspected damaged infrastructure in General Santos City and nearby provinces. The DPWH has ordered the construction of a detour road following the collapse of a key highway and continuous clearing operations and structural assessments in quake-affected areas.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Education or DepEd has allocated more than 3.5 billion pesos from its Quick Response Fund to support schools affected by the magnitude 7.8 earthquake in Mindanao. Education Secretary Sani Angara said the funding will cover emergency response efforts, temporary learning spaces, classroom repairs, and the reconstruction of damaged school facilities. Initial assessments show more than 1,300 classrooms in 267 public schools were damaged, including nearly 200 that were completely destroyed. DepEd has also deployed mental health support teams and alternative learning materials as classes remain suspended in over 1,200 schools across Mindanao.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Office of Civil Defense or OCD says sufficient supplies and personnel are available to respond to the effects of the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that struck Sarangani and nearby provinces Monday. The quake has affected nearly 146,000 individuals across regions 9, 11, 12, and BARM, with more than 32,000 people currently staying in evacuation centers. Authorities have recorded 37 deaths, 488 injuries, and 4 missing persons, although these figures are still being validated. More than 2,700 search, rescue, and retrieval personnel remain deployed as response operations continue in the hardest hit areas, particularly Sarangani and General Santos City.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLCS, has warned that communities located along the country's 6 active trenches could experience earthquakes as strong as magnitude 8.2. PHIVOLCS Director Teresito Bacolcol said this include the Philippine Trench, East Luzon, Throp, Manila, Negros, Sulu, and Cotabato trenches. The warning comes after the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that struck off Sarangani on Monday, the strongest recorded in the country so far this year. Authorities are urging coastal residents to immediately move to higher ground after a strong quake, especially if they observe sudden sea level changes or hear a roaring sound from the sea, possible signs of a tsunami.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Transportation, or DOTR, says the General Santos Airport has reopened for disaster response operations following Monday's magnitude 7.8 earthquake. Acting Transportation Secretary Giovanni Lopez said military, humanitarian, government, and cargo flights are now allowed as relief efforts continue. Commercial flights, however, remain suspended and are expected to resume within a week as repairs are completed. An inspection found damaged ceilings, cracked walls, and broken glass at the control tower. Lopez has ordered the immediate rehabilitation of airport facilities while ensuring the safety of workers and passengers before commercial operations resume.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG, has intensified search and rescue operations in General Santos City following Monday's magnitude 7.8 earthquake. About 150 responders, along with K9 units and deployable response groups, were sent to a collapsed commercial building in Barangay Kalumpang to search for possible survivors. The PCG says it is coordinating with other agencies as part of ongoing humanitarian efforts in affected communities. Meanwhile, separate rescue operations are continuing in Barangay Bawing after 7 people were swept away by strong waves, with 1 confirmed dead and 2 still missing.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board, or LTFRB, has started structural inspections of public transport terminals in the Davao region and Sorsogon following Monday's magnitude 7.8 earthquake. LTFRB Chair Vigor Mendoza II ordered regional offices to coordinate with local governments and the DPWH to assess the safety of bus terminals, transport hubs, and licensing offices. The inspection aims to ensure the safety of passengers and transport workers amid ongoing aftershocks. The LTFRB also directed contingency planning to prevent service disruptions and ensure continued transport operations in affected areas.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, says prices of basic commodities in General Santos City must remain stable for 60 days following the declaration of a state of calamity after Monday's magnitude 7.8 earthquake. DTI Secretary Maria Cristina Roque said regional offices are monitoring prices daily to ensure adequate food supply and prevent unjustified increases. She also reminded businesses that price controls are in effect in affected areas. Meanwhile, the Energy Department urged the public to report fuel price violations through the eGov mobile app for immediate government action.
Dateline Malacañang.
Power restoration in earthquake-hit areas in Mindanao is expected to be completed by Wednesday, according to the National Electrification Administration or NEA. The agency says 15 of 23 substations and 41 feeders have already been energized, restoring electricity to over 201,000 households out of nearly 339,000 affected. Authorities are prioritizing hospitals with 12 of 24 already reconnected, while full restoration is targeted within 48 hours. Meanwhile, the Department of Energy continues to monitor fuel supply, with most facilities operational despite some temporary disruptions following the quake.
Dateline Malacañang.
The government says it remains focused on creating quality jobs and reducing poverty as it pursues sustained economic growth. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the administration's economic strategy centers on expanding opportunities while ensuring that more Filipinos benefit from growth. She cited a statement from the Department of Economic Planning and Development Secretary Arsenio Balisacan outlining the government's priorities.
The government's thrust is to grow the economy while creating high-quality jobs, investing in skills and other productivity-enhancing measures, addressing gaps in social protection systems, and building national and local state capacity toward accessible, resilient public services.
Statement comes after the World Bank reported that nearly 3 in 10 Filipinos remain vulnerable to falling into poverty. The World Bank also noted that the Philippines has been among the fastest growing middle-income economies over the past 15 years, with growth described as broadly pro-poor and averaging 3.5% annually among top-performing countries. It added that the country could potentially become a predominantly middle-class society by 2040 if key reforms are implemented to boost job creation and strengthen household resilience. Castro said the government remains committed to supporting workers and livelihoods despite ongoing economic challenges. She also welcomed the latest labor data showing a decline in unemployment from 5.8% in March to 4.7% in April, citing gains in the services sector as a key driver of job growth.
Kahit medyo nag-increase po ang employment rate, patuloy pa rin po ang ating gobyerno sa paglilikha po ng dekalidad na trabaho at pagbibigay ng mga livelihood projects sa ating mga kababayan.
Pala said the administration will continue expanding employment programs and livelihood initiatives as part of its broader development agenda, while urging the public to remain optimistic as economic gains are sustained and further improved in the coming years.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang has dismissed as trash the testimonies of 18 former bodyguards of dismissed Ako Bicol Party List Representative Zaldi Co, citing alleged inconsistencies in their statements regarding supposed cash deliveries to government officials. Speaking at a palace briefing on Tuesday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro questioned the credibility of the testimonies and said the claims would not hold up in court. Castro pointed to what she described as inconsistencies and retractions in the statements, including the omission of certain names that had earlier been linked to the allegations. She also questioned why the lawyer representing the group had been speaking publicly instead of individuals making the claims.
Basura. Total, sabi naman nila, sila ay naghahakot ng basura. So, itong mga klase ng mga statements na to, na pinuna rin na bakit ang abogado nagsasalita at hindi yung 18 kargador or 18 maleta boys. Hindi po ito tatayo sa korte.
As to characterize the allegations made by the former security aides, Castro maintained that inconsistent testimonies would not withstand judicial scrutiny.
Yung ganitong klase mga statements na pabago-bago, hindi po ito makakapasa sa masusing mga pag-aaral at pagsusuri ng korte. So, dito pa lamang po makikita na natin kung ano-anong klase ang mga kwento nila para makapanira lamang.
Bodyguards have alleged that they delivered bags and luggage containing cash to several politicians and prominent personalities. Meanwhile, the Philippine Navy earlier reported that 4 of the 18 individuals identified as former Marines were never part of the service, while most of the others had already been dishonorably discharged. Malacañang maintains that allegations of wrongdoing must be supported by credible and consistent evidence before they can be given weight in legal proceedings.
Dateline Malacañang.
In our news, the Department of Agriculture or DA has lifted the temporary import ban on poultry products from Argentina following the resolution of highly pathogenic avian influenza cases in the country. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. said the decision will help diversify supply sources and strengthen food security while supporting price stability in the local market. The DA said the move restores Argentina's disease-free status under international standards, allowing the resumption of poultry trade under existing regulations. Officials said the policy is expected to benefit poultry integrators and breeders while improving supply resilience for the domestic industry.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD has launched its Bangsamoro Umpungan sa Nutrition program in Basilan and Tawi-Tawi to address malnutrition among children and pregnant and lactating women. About 5,800 beneficiaries are currently being covered in the initial rollout, with children receiving 180 days of hot, nutritious meals. DSWD says the program also includes health monitoring, deworming, micronutrient supplementation, and livelihood support for families. The agency targets to expand coverage to 22,000 beneficiaries across the Bangsamoro region by 2026 as part of efforts to improve early childhood nutrition.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Technical Education and Skills Development Authority or TESDA is ramping up its digital transformation to widen access to training and jobs for Filipinos. TESDA Secretary Jose Francisco Benitez says the agency's new Skills Passport app uses secure digital identity verification and allows users to store certifications, apply for scholarships, and access training centers and job matching services. TESDA is also expanding its online learning platform in partnership with global organizations, offering free courses in ICT, entrepreneurship, and artificial intelligence. The agency says the initiative aims to help Filipinos re-skill and upskill anytime, anywhere, and prepare for a digital economy.
Dateline Malacañang.
Returning overseas Filipino workers or OFWs now have expanded access to livelihood support programs through a new partnership led by the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration or OWA. OWA Administrator Patricia Yvonne Kaunan says the agency has partnered with the Philippine Franchise Association, the Department of Trade and Industry, TESDA, and other groups to help OFWs start businesses through guided mentorship, training, and financing. Under the program, the Small Business Corporation can finance up to 80% of franchise costs at a 1% monthly interest rate, leaving returning workers to shoulder only about 20% of capital. OWA also signed a separate agreement with TESDA in Hong Kong, allowing OFWs to undergo skills training and earn National Certificate II credentials while still abroad. The agency says the initiative aims to strengthen reintegration programs by turning returning workers into entrepreneurs and skilled professionals.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that concludes today's edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, I am Win Peñano. Good day.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.